So it's been something that, especially in the past 80 or so years since World War II or so, industrial era, that pants have been like something that society has been softened up to. It took a while, but now it's like much more soft. Like the delineation there is not nearly as great, but it was very much like a bigger deal. So the reason why it's easier now is because you have not only like little bloomers they made for women or whatever, but now you have a whole line of clothing that is, in the world's eyes, very acceptable. And so they have a whole section, you know, they'll have like women's clothes, and then they'll have like women's pants, right? So they'll have a whole like line of feminized pants.
Mm-hmm.
So the part of the reason why it's not so glaring is because women are, not that men aren't, because, you know, men like have a visual aspect too as far as how they look, right? So, but women, it's a whole lot harder to mask a women's femininity and their shape just because you put them in pants. You put a guy in a skirt, that's going to crush everything, okay, real quick. But it's not like that with women. So it's a lot easier to say, look, so you just have men's pants and women's pants. But you don't have like women's dresses. You don't go into the men's section and have men's dresses. But the way things are headed now, I would venture to say that in about 20 years, 30 years, in your lifetime, you're probably going to find some stores that'll have a section where it has men's dresses.
Oh, center than
and
that.
And then the sicker thing, like parenthetically, eventually you'll go to the kids section, you'll have boys' dresses. Just like you have girls' pants. So, you know, teaser, spoiler, you know.
I never thought of that before.
That's where that's all headed, right? Eventually, right? So, but that doesn't make it any less different. Like, really, there's no such thing as girls' pants. It's just pants that are feminized for, you know, so girls can fit their shape better. So that's why they call them women's pants. What you really have is a woman who is wearing a man's garment, okay? And you know the scripture. It says very clearly, you know, that in reference to cross-dressers and transvestites and all that, that if you put on the garment of the opposite sex, for that reason, you're what?
I don't know.
It is an...
What, abomination?
Right, to God, because that takes the sacred order and defiles it, and it just turns it all perverted and twisted and whatever. I mean, I don't know if you've been around it in your travels in the world, but I got around a good, fat, heaping dose of men in women's dresses. You ever been around that much?
No.
Okay. So when you're around that, there's just something about your inside that just kind of just goes, bleh, you know, just like really is just like hard to get by that. And a lot of times those guys will act weird. I mean, you know, they're like touched or whatever. They just kind of like the spirit of perversion is like almost possessed them. In some cases it has. So you get around that, you're just like going, hi, you know, it's like, okay. This is like, all right, and you know, so it really is glaring. Right? I'm only bringing this out because it bears explaining. Like the whole thing needs to be taken into context. So what happens is you may say to yourself, well, that's not the same thing. Well, in essence, it is, because there's just because something is like a gradation, it may be like a 2 or a 3. It doesn't mean it's not on the same scale. Okay, it's still 1 to 10. Rate this a 1 to 10. Well, that's a 10. Well, that's a 3. It's still in the same line. So you're headed that way. And in God's eyes, that's how it really is. It's very, very much like that. It's like it starts here, goes all the way to here, and that's somewhere in between is still on that scale, and it's just a bad idea. Generally, at the very, very least, it's a bad idea because it just heads that way, and it blurs all the lines. And it's just not good practice, shall we say. So, anything that is masculine that's put on a girl, it can make the girl look less feminine. A guy that's sober and thinks in those terms, and his heart is pure and feels in those terms, that's exactly how it is. Like, anytime I see a girl, whether it's a little girl, like, you know, the kids that were here just the other day,
little girls,
or any girl in pants, immediately they become less feminine. Like, it's nothing I can do about it. It's absolutely automatic. Okay? So either something's wrong with me and my judgment, and that's flawed, and you can say, well, you can just take that and throw it in the wastebasket, or something's wrong with that. Okay? So what we have here is a case of, Jesus said, you will know them by their what? Fruits. Okay? I'm not holding myself up, but I was just kind of enjoying this on the way to the doctor this morning. And honey, I was going to tell you too, you know, I was going to ask you, like, doesn't it feel really nice that 30 years has gone by now, and like the fruit of living for God, and I'm not saying this to bag on anyone else who has a testimony, who's older, who got converted, but let's just face it, doesn't it feel nice? Like, doesn't it feel clean that there's been no drugs, no alcohol, no smoking for 30 years? Don't you feel kind of like clean from that? I mean, I go around and it feels clean to me. Like, I know that my body didn't take that hit on top of it, like for those 30 years, so I feel good, you know, inside, like when I'm normally healthy. But I just feel like the years that stacked up have brought a certain sense of like purity, you know? It's just like, it feels, the stream is clean. You know, it's not polluted or anything like that. Not that God doesn't refresh and renew that, and you can feel the similar way, but just those years that have stacked up, it's one of like, bless the Lord, all my soul, and forget not all his benefits. It's a benefit. It's a benefit. Let's face it. 30 years off that stuff. Okay. So I'd say my assertion is that I'm correct, and that my fruits have borne this out. Okay? Like, the idea that what I'm saying is, my argument for what I say is right is way, way stronger than somebody who just, you know, like this, you know? You see what I'm saying? Like, it's borne out. The argument is borne out that I think you're wrong, actually. I think I'm right, all right? That's kind of how I feel. Like, either I'm right or I'm wrong. If I'm right, okay, then I'm right. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. Okay, fine. But if I am right, what I'm saying, all that stuff is my observational vantage point of wisdom that took much thought, much consideration, much sorrow of heart to come to, that isn't just a slight thing to be trifled with. It's something that, like, it you know, it's like you earn that. Like, I put the work in, whereas someone who's flippant and doesn't care will say, it doesn't matter. What have they done? Went, smoked another joint, had a good time, and then gave no thought. Where have they been? Have they been to the mountaintop? You know, I've been to that mountain, that guy in LA, you know. But it's true. You have your moments with God. You've had your moments with God. I've had a moment with God at the beach, in the forest, on the mountain, in an elevator, in an orchard, like in a house. You know, like lots of moments, you know.
Praise the Lord.
And it's like that kind of like all comes out the same. All those moments of anointing and touch and consideration, and you're alone with God, and all that, it all comes out the same. Every time it's the same result, is my point, honey. And, you know, it's something that, you know, no one can take away. The experience that we have with the Lord, I'm not saying you don't have any, but it bears a fruit over a long period of time. And, you know, one of the smartest people that's ever walked the planet, as far as an IQ is concerned, they said that, you know, that it's observation that brings wisdom. Okay? Your IQ can bring raw intelligence, but observation brings wisdom. And inadvertently, I didn't do it on purpose, and I know this sounds pretty braggy, but your mother and I have had a ton of time to take in lengthy and grand amounts of observation, where we watched, you know, and observed, and certain things have happened, and then we watch longer, and certain things happen because of that thing happening and all that. And after a while, you just kind of come to some conclusions, you know, because the observations just keep repeating themselves with similar circumstances and similar things, to where it's like, okay, conclusion is in, you know, like how many times am I going to watch the same thing and know the same result and all this before? So in other words, science itself is built on observation from a beginning to an end process. Then they stack up the evidence and come to certain conclusions and results, conclusions based on the results and stuff like that. So I would say that what we've stacked up is experiential and observational analysis that bears itself out repetitively. Therefore, in a way, it's its own science. All right? So we have the science of life, if you will, behind us when we say these things. We don't say them easily or lightly. We say them as people that have really, really spent time on it, you know? So I think our argument is very, very solid and in favor of these things. We got a good feel for what God's pleased with, what he's not pleased with, and his word bears it out. You know, it's like not like we're just concocting or making things up when we, you know, tell people these things. And the nice part is, what I like is we get to tell people exactly the same thing, no matter who they are, whether they're our daughter, you know, that we love, or a stranger that we don't know. We can tell them the exact same thing. That's kind of fun to me. I always like that. I don't know why, but
well, because it's truth. Would you like to talk a little bit more or elaborate at all on the distinctions of the sexes and why God is pleased with that?
It's his creative order that's sacred. He set that up. He ordained that and set it in motion a certain way. So anytime there's something sacred and holy, anything that comes along and wants to change it, tamper with it, defile it, remove it, eradicate it, or anything, is just earns the wrath of God, because he set it up to be beautiful and holy and sacred, and it flows a certain way that produces righteousness, peace, holiness, a fruit of that nature. So anytime you mess with it, it's like you're doing evil, you know. And it's just, that's why it's an abomination, because it's impure, it's unholy, it's evil, it's dirty. So any of that is bad, bad baby.